This program will demonstrate the recommended techniques to use for turning the Boeing 777-200 and -300 while taxiing. We will also look at the ground maneuver camera system and its use during taxiing operations. Let's first take a look at the geometry of the airplane in relationship to taxiing operations. Shown here is the distance of the main gear from the nose wheels, and the distance from the nose wheels to where the pilot sits. It's important to note the main gear tracks inside of the nose wheels during turns. To keep the main gear near the center line during turns, it is necessary to oversteer the nose wheels. Note the importance of keeping the nose wheels near the outside edge of the turn. For narrower taxiways, it may be necessary to track the nose wheels parallel to the outside edge of the intersecting taxiway until the main gear clear the inside corner of the turn. If insufficient oversteer is used during turns, the main gear may travel off the taxi surface on the inside of the turn. With the pilot sitting approximately 12 feet or 4 meters in front of the nose wheels, knowing when and where to begin the turn calls for specific techniques. Direct visual observation out of the flight deck windows remains the primary means of determining when to initiate turns and for verifying airplane position relative to the edge of taxi surfaces. The visual cues introduced in this program assume the pilot's seat is adjusted for proper eye position and will work for either the 777-200 or -300 model. The following techniques also assume a typical taxiway width. Since there are many combinations of turn angles, taxiway widths, fillet sizes, and taxiway surface conditions, the pilot's judgment must dictate the point of turn initiation and the amount of nose wheel tiller input required for each turn. Except for turns less than approximately 30 degrees, speed should be 10 knots or less prior to turn entry. If taxi speed is too slow, it may be necessary to add thrust during the turn, which may cause jet blast damage to nearby objects. For turns significantly less than 90 degrees, use a technique similar to other large airplanes. Steer the nose wheels far enough beyond center line of the turn to keep the main gear close to the center line. Let's first take a look at a typical 90-degree turn. Initiate the turn as the intersecting taxiway center line, or intended exit point, approaches the aft edge of the number 2 window. Initially use approximately full tiller. Adjust the tiller input as the airplane turns to keep the nose wheels outside of the taxiway center line. Nearing turn completion, when the main gear are clear of the inside edge of the taxiway, gradually release the tiller input as the airplane lines up with the intersecting taxiway center line or intended taxi path. The rate at which the pilot should release the tiller input is dictated by the width of the taxiway. Here is another 90-degree turn to the right this time. Once again, the turn is initiated as the intersecting taxiway center line approaches the aft edge of the number 2 window. To review, use the aft edge of the number 2 window as a reference point to initiate the turn. For a typical taxiway width, oversteer the nose wheels to keep the main gear near the taxiway center line when making turns of 90 degrees or more. Insufficient oversteer may result in the main gear traveling beyond the taxiway edge on the inside of the turn. A minimum radius 180-degree turn requires a minimum of 156 feet or 47.5 meters of pavement for the -200 model and 182 feet or 55.4 meters for the -300 model. Approach the edge of the taxi surface at a shallow angle until the outboard side of the main gear wheels are near the edge. The lower outboard corner of the pilot's number 1 window is a good visual reference for the outboard side of the main gear wheels on the same side. The lower inboard corner of the pilot's number 1 window is a good reference for the opposite side main gear wheels. If available, the ground maneuver camera system can be utilized to confirm the main landing gear's proximity to the edge of taxi surface. With the airplane stopped and the thrust at idle, apply full tiller in the direction of the turn. Release the brakes and add thrust on the outside engine while maintaining full tiller input. Maintain speed at 10 knots or less. As the airplane passes through 90 degrees of turn, gradually reduce the tiller input as required to align the airplane with the new direction of taxi. Light intermittent brake applications on the inside of the turn may help reduce the turn radius.